What's up, everyone? It's Caden Cleveland here at the Oklahoma Senate, and you are joining us for another episode of OK Senate Sit Down. This week, we are joined with one of our senators, the chair of our subcommittee on Public Safety and Judiciary, Senator Adam Pugh. Senator, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So guys, some of the things we're going to be talking about today are a little bit learning about Senator Pugh, his background, everything that he brings to the Senate, and then also we're going to be talking a little bit about his committee and everything that he's doing, I guess, working into the session here in the next few months. So, sound good, Senator?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hang tight, guys, and we will be right back. Welcome back. As I mentioned before, we are joined this week with Senator Adam Pugh. So, Senator, before we get into talking about Senate, I guess about your committee and everything that you have going on, give us a little bit of information on your background, where you come from, what do you do outside of the Senate, outside of the Capitol building?
Well, I'm a dad and a husband, and certainly that's the stuff I'm most proud of. Been married to my wife Sarah for almost 11 years now. Nice. We've got three little kids, 7, 4, and 1. My two oldest girls, Sadie and Amelia, mm-hmm. and then our 1-year-old is Charlie.
Well, awesome.
And so when I'm not at the Capitol, I spend the bulk of my time with my family. Mm-hmm. I represent Edmond in the Senate, and so I have just the top of Oklahoma County.
Right.
So the majority of Edmond, and then all of Arcadia, and then just a little bit of Oklahoma City.
Gotcha.
And then the Oakdale area.
So, and then you also work in the aerospace industry.
Yeah,
correct?
That's right. So that's my industry, and
Gotcha.
That's really where my passions lie when it comes to my private sector experience. Right. I flew for the Air Force for a number of years. And Tinker was my last active duty assignment.
So is that what actually brought you to Oklahoma City, was being stationed at Tinker?
Yeah, so Tinker was my last active duty assignment. I had been stationed a few different places overseas, mm-hmm. as well as a few bases stateside. My first assignment at Tinker Air Force Base is when I met my wife.
Really?
Sarah. Yeah, we were introduced to each other through a mutual friend that I was working with. And when I got off active duty and get out of the military, mm-hmm. This was just the place that I wanted to call home and raise our family.
Man, that's awesome. That's really cool to hear too, that you'd been all these different places, yep. and you decided on that Oklahoma would be the place to be. Yep. So, okay, so that you have kind of a unique background, I guess. You're in the aerospace industry. You also are a military veteran, and then you just got named by Senator Triadel Pro Tem the chair of our subcommittee on Public Safety and Judiciary. Give us a little background on that. What are you kind of thinking as we move into session? Is there any big focuses that you're looking at for this session?
I think if you were to go around the Capitol and ask anybody in this building mm-hmm. that's an elected official, they would tell you that we need to figure out criminal justice reform.
Right, okay.
And there's a financial implication mm-hmm. to that, right? I mean, we just can't afford to keep doing what we are doing.
Right.
I have the Department of Corrections under my purview now in that subcommittee, and Director Albaugh has asked us for $1.5 billion. Mm-hmm. He needs to fix some of the existing facilities that we have, right. as well as they're looking at building a new facility. Mm-hmm. And that may be necessary. But more importantly, do we need to continue to invest in a building that's going to lock people up?
Right.
If there are folks that maybe we can let out earlier, mm-hmm. or if there's tweaks to the criminal statutes mm-hmm. that we could make that would lessen the severity of penalties right. for maybe folks who did things that we didn't like but aren't necessarily dangerous to society.
Gotcha.
So I think there's a big bipartisan mm-hmm. push to figure that out. And then the other part of it is just the human element of this. We're number one in the country in incarcerated women rates. Right. We're number 2 in male incarceration. And you're taking an income earner out of the household. You're taking a dad or a mom, a wife, mm-hmm. Out of the household. So now you're affecting the family unit.
Right.
And oftentimes you're making a generational impact.
Yeah.
So now the children in that home, if there are any, they're growing up without a parental figure. And maybe now there's an additional burden on grandparents or an aunt and uncle, or worst case scenario, now they have to matriculate through the foster care system. And so oftentimes the statistics would now say that those kids are now probably going to end up in the criminal justice system. And so I think we got to balance the financial implications of our policy along with, is this good for the people of Oklahoma?
That's something Senator Treat talked about on one of his podcasts a few weeks ago. He mentioned as one of the big accomplishments that the legislature has made over the past few years is criminal justice. And he mentioned that along with that, the legislation that's been passed to try to improve criminal justice in our state, along with that comes an investment side of it as well. So an actual dollars and cents side of this to make these, criminal justice acts actually take and have a big effect. Would you kind of agree with that?
Certainly. So, it's wrong of us to say that, well, if we don't put this person in prison, we're going to save all this money.
Right.
Because the truth is, if they were going to go to prison and instead we're going to redirect it through maybe a program where they can get the counseling services that they need, or they can reacclimate as they leave, the corrections system. So now maybe they need a job. Most importantly, they probably need a parole officer. They need all the other support services. For them to be a contributing member to our society and not end up back in the prison system. So it's
so
not
much more than just
necessarily
opening the doors and saying, okay,
everyone go free and thrive. And I wish it were that simple, and it's not. And so when we talk about the economics of this, it's not a dollar saved as that we're going to have this extra dollar. It's well, maybe we need to redirect those resources into these other services. Mental health. I mean, we talked about mental health and
definitely
all the services that that population of need requires, so that we can keep them out of the prison system, which is not the best place for them to get the support and the services that they need.
So it sounds like from so far with your, role as the chair of the subcommittee on public safety, that really criminal justice reform has been a major piece of it. And then along with it, just kind of like you're explaining, it's not as simple as just passing a few pieces of legislation. There's so much more in-depth, ness to it until we actually start making a real big impact here in the state. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, gotcha. and then in addition, as we work through pretty challenging and complex problems, we're going to have this population of folks who were felons. And how do we integrate them back into society? And what's the safe way for us to do that to the public at large? And where are they going to be most successful? Once they do get out of the system, are there barriers to entry for them to get a job? I mean, I'm also, interestingly enough, working on licensure reform and all the occupations that we currently license in the state. And there's a lot of rules about felons not being able to go work in a particular industry. And some of those rules are meant to protect the public. And I would support those. But some of them don't make sense for 2018.
Some of them are just more so barriers for those people being able to integrate back into society. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about, so far, on criminal justice, everything you got going on in your committee. You mentioned licensure reform. Outside of those topics, is there anything else you're looking at, with session right on the horizon and coming up quick that is in your purview as legislation you might run this session?
Absolutely. As I mentioned in the beginning, aerospace is really the industry that I've been in for almost 2 decades. When I got out of the military, I went to work for an aerospace company, and I've been in that industry since. We recently passed agriculture as the number 2 economic driver in the state of Oklahoma. And I don't know if we'll see it in my time in the legislature, but I'd love to pursue goals that would push us to number 1.
Absolutely.
And the reason for that is not because ag isn't important, or energy is important, or biotechnology is important to the state of Oklahoma, but the more diverse we can be as a state when it comes to our economy, we can eliminate some of the volatility that our economy has traditionally been associated with because we're so tied to the price of commodities. My biggest concern right now with our industry is meeting the workforce needs. You know, we have a number of great companies who are already here. We have Tinker Air Force Base, our largest single-site employer in the state of Oklahoma. Base up in Enid, a base in Altus. We have all this awesome aerospace stuff going on in Broken Arrow. So there's so many economic advantages and competitive advantages we have here. But right now we're not meeting the needs of that
the actual workforce.
Right. We are, estimates are about 1,000 people short.
Really?
And we're talking everything from mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, software engineers, cybersecurity specialists, to folks who turn wrenches and bang on sheet metal building wings for aircraft. And we're going to get the KC-46, which is the Air Force's next generation refueling platform. And about a month ago, we found out that Tinker is going to do all the maintenance for the new B-21 bomber, which is amazing for our state and amazing for the aerospace industry. But if we can't provide the people that industry needs and those companies and that the military needs, at some point, they're going to pack up and go somewhere else. And so I've been having a lot of conversations with the leaders in this industry and bringing a lot of people together so that we can be real intentional about how we're going to meet that workforce need and how we're going to educate those kids and then, you know, be able to say, congratulations, here's your diploma and here's a job.
That's exactly right. So we're about out of time here, but is there anything you wanted to add before we close off?
No, just thanks for having me. I'm very excited about, session. We welcomed another very large class of freshman senators. The House of Representatives is the largest class, I believe, that's ever been sworn in.
Lots of new faces.
And so, a majority of us are newer to the legislative process, and so I still have a ton to learn, and so I'm trying to be very active and engaged in my community. And my door is always open.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us this week. And guys, I hope you've been able to learn a little bit about what Senator Pugh has going on. I mean, we talked about criminal justice reform. He's the new chair of our Public Safety Subcommittee. A ton going on there. And we talked about, aerospace and all the exciting things going on in aerospace right now, and just all the momentum being built up. Some really exciting things happening in our Oklahoma economy here. So I guess with that, guys, we're about out of time, but we will be back next week. And if you want to check out more of our videos, they're always available at protem.oksenate.gov. And we have articles, videos, graphics on there, just good information to have about the state, about the Senate, and just everything that's going on in Oklahoma. So thank you guys again for joining us, and I guess we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.